I'm going to tell you something. I was at a gathering last night, and my friend said to me, hey, give us a rundown what you're going to talk about tomorrow. And then he got up and walked away. And I was sitting in front of a bunch of his guests about to share what I was going to share with you all this morning. Let me tell you this. I told those guys last night I've been preaching the gospel for 32 years. I'll be 48 years old here in a couple of weeks. I've been preaching since I was 16 years old. I could not have preached this sermon when I was 16. Couldn't have preached it when I was 28, when we started Kingdom. Don't think I could have preached it at 40. Daniel just prayed and said, Lord, I know you have given Kevin many words. What I'm to share with you today is really what I've learned in my life. This is a sermon that demands your attention. You will receive from it if you give your attention to it. It is one that in some respects is quite disturbing. But if you'll hear what Daniel was just praying about pain and hurt and exhaustion, and he hears me say under my breath, but they don't have to stay there. That's what the message of today is all about. Because I know there's people in this room who are hurting. I know there are people in this room who are angry. Do you know how many people say to me, I'm so angry with God, and I know that's wrong. It's all right to be angry. We're going to talk about that today. I know a lot of you have questions. We're trying to get you to that place where God is. Because you don't have to live in the hurt. It's there. It's not going away. You don't have to live in the grief. It's there. It's not going away. We want you to be immersed in God, not your grief. We want you to be immersed in God, not your pain. We want you to be immersed in God, not your loss. We want you to be immersed in God because there and there alone is goodness and peace. I want to begin with a question this morning. I want you to look at both of those pictures. The picture on the left is obscenity. The picture on the right is goodness. The picture on the left is the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The picture on the right is the resurrection of the Savior. I want you to really think about that question. Can obscenity be turned to good? It's easy to look at that picture and say, oh yeah, I watched The Passion of the Christ, and as tough as that movie was, I witnessed it. Obscenity has been turned to good. There will be people in this room who have buried their children. On this Sunday, there will be people in this room who have buried their children. I'm guessing there's people in this room right now. When I was a little boy, I walked into my grandma's house and I saw a picture of this pretty blonde-haired girl in a light blue dress and white pearls. Perfect picture from the 50s and early 60s. And I said, Granny, who is that girl? She said, that's your Aunt Dorothy Ellen. I said, how come I've never met her? She said she died in a car crash when she was 18. Can I ask the question again? Can obscenity be turned to good? That's where we live, guys. That's where we live. Can the obscenity of your life, can God take that and turn it to good? It's really what this whole thing comes down to, isn't it? We know that Jesus taught in parables. The people of that day said, why don't you just speak to us plainly? Jesus kept teaching in parables. I'm going to give you a poetic parable here this morning to start. Some of you will be very confused by this. Some of you will go, oh, I understand what it says. All of us should give our attention to it. It's a poem by a guy named Billy Collins. It's called The Night of the Fallen Limb. I want you to think about what we're talking about here today as I read through this poem to you. Can obscenity be turned to good? As I read this poem, I want you to find the obscenity, and I want you to find the goodness. Can obscenity be turned to good? It sounded like a chest of drawers being tipped over, but it turned out to be the more likely the crashing down of a limb. And there it was, crippled on the lawn in the morning after the storm had passed. One day you may notice a chip on a vase, or an oddly shaped cloud, or a car parked at the end of a shadowy lane. But what I noticed that summer day from a reading chair on the small front porch was a sparrow who appeared out of nowhere, as birds often do. And then it vanished into the leafy interior of the fallen limb, as if it were still growing from the tree, budding and burgeoning like all the days before. Toward evening, 2 men arrived with a chainsaw and left behind only a strewing of sawdust and a scattering of torn leaves before driving off in their green truck. But earlier, I heard chirping, issuing from inside the severed appendage, as if nothing had happened at all, as if that bird had forever to sing her little song. And that reminded me of the story of Saint Denis, the 3rd century Christian martyr, who reacted to his own decapitation by picking his head up from the ground, after it tumbled to a stop, of course, and using it to deliver to the townspeople what turned out to be his most memorable sermon. That's an interesting poem. Sounded more like a chest of drawers when the branch fell from the tree. All of us have been in the middle of storms. Rained pretty hard this morning. Any branches fall from the trees? I don't know. I'm not sure the thunder clapped today or the lightning struck, but I'm guessing all of us have been through some storm in our lives, where when the storm passed, the rain stopped, the thunder and the lightning had gone away, we stepped out of the security of our home to our front yard and said, that was quite a storm. I guess it's time to clean up the pieces. And isn't it funny that the sparrow that we sing in the hymn that God's eye is always upon just keeps living and sees the broken branch on the ground, not as a broken branch, but home. It's like the leaves aren't going to die now that that branch is broken. They're still green. And even in the brokenness, they find that greenery of home. And they land there and go deep there, even in the brokenness. And they just keep singing that song, like the song never stopped and like they have all day long and all the rest of their lives to just keep singing. But life doesn't stop, does it? Pretty soon, 2 workmen with a chainsaw show up, and they just cut up what was broken up and needs to be cast away. And as they leave in their green truck with all of their work that they just came to do like they do every other day, all they leave behind is sawdust and torn leaves. And that sparrow just sitting there going, well, I guess that home is gone. But I know God's eye is on me. And I know He'll provide me a new branch with beautiful leaves. And it may get hit with another storm, but God will continue to provide for me. And I'm just going to keep on singing. And even if my head gets cut off, I'm going to let it stop rolling and pick it up and preach a heck of a sermon. You really believe God can turn the most obscene part of your life to goodness? That's an informed yep. I'm going to let you share your story someday, you giver of the yep. The cross is obscene. How many of you have said to me, I can't watch the Passion of the Christ, it's just too heavy? It's because you don't like to look at obscenity. The cross is obscene. But the obscenity of the cross ends in resurrection's goodness. Isn't it beautiful that the cross is not the finish line? Just part of the journey. Just part of the journey. You see why I couldn't preach this sermon when I was 16? Because I didn't know anything at 16. Huh? You tracking with me? You're a lot smarter today, I hope, than you were when you were 16. No offense to the 16-year-olds in the room. The cross is obscene, but the obscenity of the cross ends in resurrection's goodness. You want a definition of faith? Here's one. There's no evil so dark and so obscene, but that God can't turn it to good. I love the Christian writer Frederick Buechner. My good buddy Jason Upton turned me on to his writings about a year ago. And as I was preparing this week, I came across this quote, and it's really where our question comes from this morning. To the problem of evil, Christianity ultimately offers no theoretical solution at all. I cannot reconcile what we heard come out of the Catholic Church over these last couple of weeks near Pittsburgh. I can't reconcile that. That's just pure evil. My friend works for the FBI. After 9/11 happened, he said, Kevin, I don't want to hear any bloviation about God doing this and God. That is an evil act by evil men. To the problem of evil, Christianity ultimately offers no theoretical solution at all. It merely points to the cross and says that, practically speaking, there is no evil so dark and so obscene, but that God can turn it to good. Can I tell you about an obscene story that I've experienced in my life? A number of years ago, a little boy named Johnny Kuhn, his parents gave me permission to tell you this today. A little boy named Johnny Kuhn contracted cancer. And in August of the last year of his life, he was admitted to the PICU unit at Ruby Memorial Hospital, and they intubated him there. And he had a machine that breathed for him. From August of that year through September, October, November, December, January, February. You were just a kid. I don't know whether you were in my living room that night or not. Might have been there. But it was an early March day, end of winter. Got a phone call. I was teaching Fellowship of Christian Athletes on my home. I think it was Thursday night, I think. They said, can you come up, Kevin? They lived a block up from my house. They were renting a house, and they'd made up a makeshift bedroom in their basement. Johnny lived downstairs, still with that intubation tube down his throat, breathing for him, day in, day out. The plunger would go down and oxygen would go into his lungs. The plunger would come up, CO2 would be pulled out. He was in the last hours of his life. 30 of us were in that room. We gathered around his bed. He had not breathed on his own since the August before. There was no sign of life left. We knew it was time. Sadly, I've had to be in that room many times in those occasions. And I can tell you this, I cannot reconcile the obscenity of a person losing his or her life. But in that moment, when the respiratory therapist pulled the tube from him, as we all looked on, that little boy who was about to go to heaven, in the midst of that obscenity, gave us all a gift. He looked at death and all of us, and this is exactly what he did with no intubation tube. was gone. Can God take obscenity and turn it to good? Will you choose to live in broken branches or the greenery that God gives us? Will you stay on the cross or move to the tomb of resurrection? Go ahead, fellas. There is no evil so dark and so obscene, but that God can turn it to good. This is one of the most interesting scriptures that Jesus speaks. The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Note what precedes glorification. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. He who loves his life loses it. And he who hates his life in this world will keep it to life eternal. If anyone serves me, he must follow me, and where I am, there my servant will be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will love him. I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Death is obscenity, and Jesus says obscenity is the required happening in all of our lives. I'm not talking about pornography. I'm talking about pain. We're not masochists nor martyrs here, but we must realize it's all around us, rather than saying it's not there, it's not there, it's not there, it's not there, it's not there. You better grow peace with it, because it ain't going anywhere until Christ returns. Will you live your life in pain? Will you live your life in death? Will you live your life in grief? Or will you live your life in God? One of my favorite books is by a lady named Ann Voskamp, and it's called The Broken Way. This is a portion of that book, and it taught me a great lesson. She writes, Daddy pulls me into himself, enfolds me. And then into the quiet, he says it's so soft I almost miss it. What I've held on to more than 1,000 times since. You know, everything all across this farm says the same thing. You know that, right? He waits till I let him look me in the eye, let him look into me, and all this fracturing. The seed breaks to give us the wheat. The soil breaks to give us the crop. The sky breaks to give us the rain. The wheat breaks to give us the bread. And the bread breaks to give us the feast. There was once even an alabaster jar that broke to give him all the glory. He looks right through the cracks of me. He smells of the barn and the dirt and the sky. And he's carrying something of the maple trees at the edge of the woods, carrying old light. He says it slowly like he means it. Never be afraid of being a broken thing. You see how much of life we spend trying to avoid being a broken thing? And Jesus says, unless you are a broken thing, no life will ever come from you. Why didn't he just walk him into the middle of the tomb rather than hang him up there on the cross? Unless a kernel of wheat fall into the ground and die, no resurrection will ever come. Stop fighting against it. Let it come and live in his peace. Why are you afraid of anything that has no power to take anything from you? There is no evil so dark and so obscene, but that God can turn it to good. I'm watching Good Morning America about a year ago, and a little boy got abducted, and they were interviewing the little boy's dad, and he said, "If God cares, He will bring my son back to me." This is what I wrote. The father is right in his emotions, but wrong in his estimation of God's perfect character. Do you know how many people come to my office and say, "I'm angry with God, and I know that's wrong"? The Bible says, "Be angry and sin not." Do you not think Job was angry with God? Angry. You could be angry with God. Maybe that will open you up to your most honest conversation. God's big enough to take it. Let me show you an example. Daniel, come up here. This is how God receives our anger. Now, you're bigger than me, so don't hit me too hard. I want you to pound on my chest as though you are so angry at me. But in your humanity, and I know your strength lasts a long time, so you're not going to punch me for too long. But let's pretend that at some point of all that anger, go ahead. Do you understand when you're angry with God? That's how He receives your anger. He doesn't strike you back. He receives it. You can't inflict any pain on God. That makes Him God, and you. And when you have no strength left, and He has received all your blows, He's going to let you lean into His chest and put His arms all around you. There is no obscenity that God cannot turn to good. When David's son dies, this is what he says. But now he has died. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? Oh, I will go to him. But he's not going to return to me. Johnny is there, waiting. It's Dee Whitehair's mom that looks at me and says, hours before she dies, "Will you show me to the door?" And I said, "Loretta, I think you know your way to the door. I'll see you on the other side." We got her made now. That's what Frank said. We got her made now. Yes, we do, Frank. Nick Tutelo. You know, Kevin, as soon as I get there, as soon as my mother got there, I'll be there. And as soon as I get there, you'll be there too. What part of life do you see? Broken branches? A severed head? Or an opportunity for a heck of a sermon? The Apostle John's greatest disciple was a guy named Polycarp. Tradition holds that when the people who were coming to take him into captivity and ultimately martyr him, when they showed up at Polycarp's home, he didn't struggle. He invited the people who had come to take him into captivity in for a dinner, set out his best dishes, and served them the greatest meal he could ever serve. And when dinner was over, Polycarp went with them. They tied him to a stake and put wood all around his feet. And they said, "We'll give you one more shot. Renounce Christ." To which Polycarp replied, "He's never renounced me." And then they lit the fire. But he didn't burn up. He glowed. And so they ran a spear into the flames and stabbed Polycarp. And he bled so much, he put the fire out. Such is the legend. I don't know if that's true. It doesn't matter if it's true. Some people think that when Stephen looked into heaven and the scripture says he fell asleep, that he died. I think he actually fell asleep. When you know the peace that passes all understanding, what can a rock do to you? I don't care if sticks and stones break my bones, because names and words cannot ever hurt me when I rest in the peace of God. Who in this room thinks they're going to stop throwing stones? The world will always throw stones. Who you think that they're going to stop throwing sticks? The sticks are still coming. They're going to call you this, that. It don't matter. Jesus says, beware when all men do speak well of you. It doesn't matter. Just go on. I don't live by their words. I rest in the peace of God. The most difficult thing to do is to eat a celebratory meal while being clawed at by the talons of heartbreak. Fasting seems far more fitting. Go ahead, gentlemen. Isaiah 42 says, if you're a bruised reed, and you will be bruised, God won't let you be broken. And you're going to come to a time in your life where you're going to be a smoldering wick. But you're going to have just enough spark there that God's going to go, isn't it amazing how breath can blow a flame out or restart it again? Breathe on me, breath of God, love and life that makes me free. When you're smoldering and there's just enough of the spark, the world's going to be going, and God's hands are going to be all around you going, just enough to start the flame again. Romans 8 says, we give ourselves to death all day long, but we are more than conquerors. Isaiah 55 says, in your life you will get thorns and you will get thistles, but God's going to turn you into the most beautiful of myrtles and cypresses in all of your thistle and thorny state. That's our God. Don't you ever forget that the God that we serve is the God who knows the death of a son, but he also knows his resurrection to life. I stood in an empty tomb in Jerusalem that never could have been any more occupied. Alive, alive, my Jesus is alive. Wow. One more quote by Buechner before we spend some time with God. For Paul, the resurrection was no metaphor. It was the power of God. And when he spoke of Jesus as raised from the dead, he meant Jesus alive and at large in the world, not as some shimmering ideal of human goodness or the achieving power of hopeful thought, but as the very power of life itself. The resurrection is no joke. It is no fairy tale. The resurrection is real, and it is the culmination of the cross, and it is who we are as God's children. How about that? There is no evil so dark and so obscene, but that God can turn it to good. That's our faith. If you're new to Kingdom today, we're about to spend some time responding to what we've heard today. Back in the old days, preachers would smack the pulpit. Scared you, didn't I? Ha ha. They'd smack the pulpit and tell you, you horrible, awful sinners, come forward and kneel. Get yourself right. And then we would all sit in the pews and say, do you see who's going forward there? That's not what we do here. We want you to come and receive goodness in the midst of your obscenity. If you can say Jesus is Lord, come, receive the sacrament of Holy Communion. If you can't, say it. Say Jesus is Lord. And then come and receive the sacrament of Holy Communion. If you just want to pray for a while by yourself, come on up here and kneel. We will have a lot of people over here to pray with you if you'd like somebody to pray with. I know a lot of people say, what are you guys trying to do with these candles? It's amazing how one little light says, I live in a lot of darkness, but I believe in the light of the world. If you have a prayer request, Brother Don down here in the front row pulls those requests off of that cross all the time and prays over all of them. If you just want to sit or you just want to stand, that's okay too. Let the Spirit of God move you during this time. Think of everything that God has done here today in song, in word, in prayer, and let the Spirit of God move in your life. Let's pray. Father, thank you. You just keep doing a work in this room. You just keep doing a work. And I thank you for this blessed meal. Jesus, we hear this today, and we look at this meal that we're about to receive. And frankly, Lord, what caused this meal is the obscenity of your death. And you say, in order to receive life, I want you to eat death. I want you to eat my flesh. And I want you to eat or drink my blood, which I have given in death to you. But when you do, you'll realize that meal in your mouth suddenly transforms, not to some sour of death, but the sweetness of life. What a mystery, God. And it's not an unsolvable mystery. And the beauty of it is, Lord God, when the mystery of communion is solved, a new mystery arises within the mystery so that we can know you deeper and deeper still. God, you spoke that to me in the prayer room this morning. Kevin, how thick is my hand? How deep down into my hand can the foundations of your life be dug? Son, deeper and deeper still is not an ocean. Deeper and deeper still is my hand. Deeper and deeper still is my heart. Deeper and deeper still is my mind. Son, dig down deep and be founded in me. I'm not going to let you go. You don't rest on the palm. You rest down deep in me, son. I will never let you go. The foundation you have in me is so deep and so strong that in your life I will be allowed to grow very tall. Oh God, thank you for this today. God, thank you for your body, which is represented in this bread. And Jesus, we thank you that you've given it to us. We thank you that week after week after week after week, we can take this bread and we can eat it in remembrance of you and declaration that you are Lord. And Jesus, thank you for your blood, which is represented in this juice. And we take it and we drink it in remembrance of you, the sacrifice you made. But Jesus, I thank you. I think of Paul's words in 1 Corinthians 15. If there is no resurrection, then our faith is futile, and we are the most pitiable. But Jesus, thank you that you are alive. And so while these go to either side of the room, bearing these gifts of grace, we don't stop in a meal of death. We may chew death, but what nourishes us is life. God, thank you that you didn't turn away from the obscenity of the cross. Thank you that you willingly received it. And from that obscenity, good grew up and permeates this world in all eternity. Thank you, God, We love and give you praise. It's in Jesus' precious name that we pray. Amen and amen. As the Spirit of God leads you, please respond.